Okay, recording in
Ready.
progress. So here we have Andre from Sweden. How you doing, mate?
I'm fine. And how about you?
Yes, as per my videos, sometimes a
Yeah.
little bit down, sometimes a little bit up. The spice of life. So for those of the viewers that are not aware, you've been a viewer of the Wake and Brave channel for, oh goodness me, a long time.
Yeah.
How many years would you think it is now?
Oh, that's hard to say, but I would think it's around 2017. But the first time I saw you was probably 2016, even. But it was a while until I started to view them purely,
Yes.
truly.
So between 6 and 7, 8 years, something like that. Then, so
Yeah.
it's a good time, and so you've read 6 chapters of
Yeah.
my book so far, and we're going to be speaking about the chapters which really meant something to you. Now, this is interesting because what I'm saying at some stage in the book is that I don't know how many of the readers I'm going to be able to touch or reach because I'm talking about pretty out there stuff. I mean, if people haven't had lots of years deep meditation experience or psychedelic experience or out of body experience or, climbing a mountain and, all these different sorts of psychological things, then it's going to appear like a fantasy novel or something, but every last word in my book is true as far as I'm concerned. And so you were speaking about the climbing of Mount Kilimanjaro
Yeah.
when I did that, which is in Tanzania in Africa. So what struck you about that?
That was the mental thing about it a whole when you had a loss of oxygen and all that kind of stuff, and
Yes.
how even for a person like me that has like a fear of heights, if I wouldn't have fear of heights, that would be extreme anyway.
Yeah.
And then another thought that just came to mind when I read it was how was the guide that you have had with us with you? Was he very stoic or was he like talkative or uh, nothing like that?
No, we barely said 2 words. We would walk for 8 hours each day, um 8 or 10 hours, and he would walk in front and I would follow him about 100 yards or less behind. Then we would come to our camp whereby the 3 Sherpas had already put up the tents and were cooking the food. So they would go on ahead of us, and they would set up camp and they would do all the preparations for the food. They would carry with them, 25 liters of water, because this was a 7-day hike.
Yeah.
And then they'd carry vegetables and lots of herbs and fruits. And so we'd have vegetable gruels every day, and they'd be setting up camp. And I never spoke a word to them. They weren't really that talkative. I don't know whether it was an etiquette thing, but they never engaged with me. And then the guide, he was probably just the average Joe. He'd climbed Mount Kilimanjaro about 30 times before. It was just a job. And at that particular time, I wasn't, I don't know whether I was so deeply involved in, my human psychology.
Mm.
Because, hello, how you doing?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Your little squirrel, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
come
a
here.
it's a cute one.
come here, little bugger. He just jumps up my leg, and he likes to just go in. He's gone in my top. He likes to go in there. So yeah, hardly anything was said. In actual fact, I asked him on one occasion how many people had died, or how many people die on Kilimanjaro each year, and he just said, "I'll tell you when we get down." And when we got down, I forgot to ask him, and so but I got the impression there was quite a few. But yeah, that whole experience was a very deep and interesting psychological one on many fronts, of course, because first and foremost, it's a physiological thing. But then, depending on how broadly you think, then it can be a very psychological thing. And the particular event which happened in that, whereby I turned off my own consciousness for 3.5 hours, because I found it so painful. I was suffering so much. I was at 20,000 feet. I'd had altitude sickness from the first day I got on the mountain. I hadn't eaten for 1.5 days, and I hadn't slept for about 5 because I just couldn't sleep. For some reason, the altitude sickness didn't allow me to sleep. And so we'd go to our tents each night for 12 hours because on the equator there, you get 6 hours of daylight and 6 hours of, 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of dark. So we went to bed after our evening meal at 6 p.m. and we rose at 6 a.m. And so we got 12 hours in a freezing cold tent. And I just lay there freezing all night, cursing the day I thought about climbing that mountain. And so I got ever increasingly more and more tired. And then by the time I was looking to ascend the last 2,000 feet, we started out at midnight because it was a 6-hour hike. And the idea was that you got to almost to the summit for daybreak. And then you'd see the silver lining over the top of the mountain because the sun was coming up directly on the opposite direction. So that's a beautiful thing to see. As we're climbing, we see the silver lining come over the mountain, and then that, reinvigorates you, and it's a sight to behold. But what happened is after I'd set off, within about half an hour, I was just completely exhausted. I was dejected, and I didn't want to climb anymore. And so I said to myself, after, praying to my daughter, because I thought probably I wouldn't make it. I was going to die because there's no help whatsoever. And I didn't know how bad the altitude sickness was going to get. I already had blurred vision and I was completely exhausted and delirious, really. But anyway, I said, well, I looked up at the stars, and the stars were absolutely huge. At 20,000 feet, the clouds are a long, long way down. And so in the nighttime, you can see Jupiter and a few of the other planets and the star constellations, and the stars look as big as plates. And so I just looked up them, and there was a beautiful calmness, stillness that just came over me, a resignation of death, and it's a very curious thing. And he's cutie, eh? He's a little cutie, yeah. And so I said to myself, well, look, the only way I'm going to make it over this mountain and down is if I can abdicate my consciousness. If I can close down my egoic consciousness, and so I climb the remainder on autopilot without being aware of it. And so we get into very, very difficult, deep, esoteric psychology when we dissociate from our ego. And lots of people, I've read about it, when they suffer the greatest of traumas, or when they are subject to ongoing sexual abuse, they vacate their ego consciousness because they cannot stand what actually is going on. And Then, of course, they suppress that into the deepest archives of their unconscious. And then in time, this is what brings neurosis around, some sort of psychological illnesses. And so Freud and Carl Jung, these were the sort of people that would be investigating these sort of things at the turn of the 1900s. And so I'd realized what had happened. I'd repressed the pain and the suffering. I'd lost my consciousness. And the next thing I was aware of was what I requested. I said, the next thing I want to see is the silver lining coming over the top of that mountain. And that was 3.5 hours before. I'd got 3.5 hours of a slog where you can't breathe and you're tired and it's slow. Climbing altitude is really quite a feat. And so lo and behold, my consciousness, my egoic consciousness came back online, and all of a sudden I saw this vista of the silver lining coming over the top of the mountain. And I'm like, whoa, oh my God, what the fuck happened there? I just completely don't remember the last 3.5 hours. I had no idea how I got there.
Yeah, that reminds a little bit about when I used to sleepwalk when I was a child. I didn't remember what had happened when I woke up when I had been walking.
Yeah. So I guess it was some form of somnambulism,
Yeah,
whereby we are operating from our unconscious. Because when we go to sleep, we are dreaming from our unconscious, and the body is operating from the unconscious. The everyday consciousness doesn't need to know about all that stuff because that's the job of the unconscious. So the unconscious takes care of, let's say, 99% of all the things that we do. And then we have this egoic consciousness, which, the voices in our head, let's do this, let's go there, shall I do this, shall I do that? Meanwhile, your heart's pumping, your digestive system's working, and, there's a million things going on in the body, all unbeknownst to the egoic mind, yeah? And so the egoic mind is just, building this illusion. And so because I've spoken about this thing being an illusion, for so many years, I thought, well, I must be able to turn it off then. If it's an illusion, I must be able to turn it off. And I discovered that I could. And so that was absolutely incredible to realize that we can actually turn off our egoic mind, but the body will continue to function and think and operate in a perfectly normal way. But we don't have this thing that's looking at it and it's being critical of it, because all that is going to happen if my consciousness stayed on board was, oh, I'm tired, I'm fucking exhausted, I don't want to do this anymore. And that wasn't going to help me. And so my survival instinct knew that it had to close that motherfucker down. And so that was closed down, and then I did it on autopilot.
So that became a kind of a numbness, an armor, so to speak.
Yeah, the numbness of the mind.
It's like I can relate to a very traumatic experience where every cell of your body is like vibrating like this.
Yeah.
And that is a sense of numbness, I will say, an armor that comes up.
Well, I think, you see, these days, very few people know what I'm going to be speaking about now. And I don't know about it from a life and death battle. Like in the old days, we'd go to war with our bows and arrows and our axes and our shields, and we'd be really in the thick of it. And I'm pretty sure the only thing that could enable you to do that is if you turned off any semblance of fear, any semblance of failing, and all the rest of it. So in instances like that, I think you just go onto autopilot, whereby you act automatically because your brain doesn't think fast enough to duck here and to, to parry here and to strike here. That has to come from years and years of practice. So when you go into battle, you leave your egoic mind behind. And you go there, and again, the unconscious takes you through the battle. And then when the battle's over, the egoic mind comes back online and goes, "Wow, what was that? That was unbelievable." But the chances are you wouldn't remember hardly any of it, because it was all just a blur. There's no reason for you to remember it. It was just an act of survival, So when we have those sort of things, those are portals to take us out of our everyday egoic consciousness. And then we would have people who have been to war, Iraq and all these sort of things. They would have this sort of thing, in the thick of a shootout, and bombs going off and all this sort of thing. But even then, I don't think it would be that acute, because wars these days are fought from such a distance. You got your drone strikes, and then you send over the mortars and the RPGs and all this sort of thing. And then you got like maybe a bit of grata-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta at 1,000 feet. You're not hands-on. You're not bayoneting, people's bodies and smashing their skulls in with axes and swords and things like that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Many instances it is with the drones and so on. I would think that some cases it's not doable, maybe with drones. Either way, it would only be robots that fought.
Yeah.
But that is the next level, so to speak.
Yeah, but just getting back now to the Kilimanjaro thing, it was an amazing thing to realize that we can actually turn off our egoic consciousness, because you don't hear this spoken about. I never heard any of the greatest psychologists speaking about this ability. They just spoke about people that evidently had done it, and that they were in the thick of trauma. But they somehow stepped outside. They denied their conscious denied that they were living that experience, because when trauma gets so traumatic, to save you dying of terror on the spot, then the egoic facet of our consciousness has to vacate, and then the body just functions without having the additional trauma of the internal dialogue telling us that we're going to die and all these sort of things. So, I mean, this whole book is very depth. Is deep. And you've read 6 chapters, and I haven't even started on the depth of what God consciousness is, and how we perceive the universe, and different levels of consciousness, and all that.
Yeah, and it's about closer to God. So God is kind of a truth in a way, and also the other aspect which you said in the beginning was like how people sometimes will have hard to perceive that as a kind of reality, but that is because it's so over rationalized. It's like they just aiming at rational things. So because they aiming at rational things, they might even be below rational things, because that becomes like the sub-rational. But what it really is, it's like transcending rationality. It's a sub-rational, or it's supra-rational, so to speak, because
Supernatural.
this kind of rationality, it came a lot with the Descartes and so on. So that's why they have this part in Eastern parts of the world, which is more in tune with the intuition and so on, that we can't see in the physical matter and so on.
Well, one of the things that I address in the book is that for so long I was looking for God with my cognizant mind. I was looking for God with my rational thinking. I was looking for God with my humanisms. But what I realized at some stage, I was looking for it with the wrong tools. And so I looked and I looked and I looked with the ego, and I couldn't find it. And I was becoming really, really frustrated, particularly when I broached the concept of faith. I'm looking into what faith really means, because the whole world, as far as religion is concerned, is given to faith. And I'm like, I don't even comprehend this concept of faith. It's something that I could never have. How could I believe in something and believe it to be absolutely true to me without seeing it, feeling it, or experiencing it? That's just a wild fantasy. I'm not made that way. You know, I've been so used to working things out in a methodical, rational way, and I'm not about to throw all that away and just clutch at faith and just believe every single word in the Bible and believe that God loves me and Jesus is with me and all this sort of stuff. I'm like, where, who, how? Show me how. But what happened is, you see, by the time I read prolifically all of these religious scriptures and people speaking about the scriptures, it dawned on me that the language of God isn't our rational thinking. The language of God is intuition.
Yeah.
And it's how we feel the universe, how we feel things deep down, because that doesn't have a rational application. Nobody could say where that stuff comes from. It evidently is the language of God. And so through that, that's how you discover.
Yeah, and it's not just like a superficial feeling, but it's a deeper sense of feeling, I would say. It's not only the five senses, but there's things that go beyond those senses as well, which
Exactly.
can only be reached through training if one isn't very, very natural gifted to begin with, or something like that, you know?
Yes. And so try as I may with all of my five senses, it was via my sixth sense which took me into the kingdom of God. And then I realized, oh my God, because you see, God isn't a corporeal thing. This universe isn't a corporeal thing, but I was looking with the mindset of things being corporeal. I was looking with the illusory mindset. I was looking for something which actually doesn't exist. You know, and you know, I was just reading this chapter today, and it was a real powerful revelation, because I was speaking to lots of people who proclaim to have faith, and I wanted to know what their faith really meant. What did it feel like? How did it come about? Did you notice the difference from when you didn't have it to when you do have it? All these existential philosophical questions that the average person just couldn't even comprehend, let alone answer. But I answered them because I tried to get engaged with this faith, because I really wanted to know. Because the difficulty was, Andre, that I already knew God. I know that I am God. Intuitively, I've known this for many years. And then all these people around me saying that, oh, you have to have faith to know God. And I have faith, and keep reading your Bible and then you will have faith. I said, I don't fucking need faith. I know. And so I was getting really frustrated and, you know, marginally angry at all these idiots telling me that I need faith. Excuse me, I don't. I fucking know that I am God. I know that I'm in touch with God because I feel it with every single cell of my body, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just told me I've got 10 minutes left, Andre. So we've got to wrap this up
Okay.
in 10 minutes.
Yeah, because of course I think about those stuff as well, being God and being connected to God, and so on. And I think about it like, yeah, taking psychedelics, you get absolutely a feeling of being that connected, that there's no distinction between you or God, you know.
Yes.
uh, but it's also about like the God spark. If a God created you is in his own image, you get the spark of God. But then I also think, but does that really mean that you are God? If you have the God spark, then you maybe not fully God, because God is fully God, while you are put a spark within the flesh, so to
Yes.
speak.
So whilst we are having this sojourn here, in this dimension, we are shards of God consciousness. We are not the God. We are a part of the God. It's just like grains of sand are a part of the beach. You know, no grain of sand could proclaim that it is the beach, but all those grains of sand are the beach. And you see, so we get involved with concepts again. And that's what
Yeah.
it's like for all living things. And I'm not saying it's just human beings. It's every single thing that is living that has a level of sentience. And all living things have a level of sentience and consciousness. They are all shards of God. They are all in God's dream. God has dreamt every single one of them. And so we have different levels of sentience. And so we have the ability to question what we are and to question what God is. But when we get into this feeling of deep intuition, we realize that language is futile. It's useless. We don't need it at all. All it does is confuse things. All we need to do is rely on our intuition to know that we are shards of God consciousness, and know that this is a dream and we're all being dreamt. We are God in that sense. We know. See, by the time we get a certain level of consciousness, we know the mind of God, because we know that God is dreaming. And I know that God is dreaming me, you know, and everybody else. It's a very, very peculiar thing. Nobody, no scientist could ever work this one out, because there's no corporality to it. It's a God intuition that tells people like me and lots of other people who have worked this thing out over many years, that's how it is. And so this is what I'm trying to explain. I'm trying to explain how I come to know this. And I'm using language, and I'm speaking about emotions and feelings and all this sort of thing. But at the end of the day, it's like the Tao Te Ching. It just is. And if we try to say what it is, that isn't it.
Yeah. Are you this? Are you that?
Yeah.
It's always like, no, I'm not that. I'm not that.
Yeah. Not this,
It's
not that.
always, it always keeps on.
Yeah. And so it really is a wonderful journey. And I've I've come to many psychological, spiritual obstacles in this past 13 years on my journey closer to God. And I think it's an absolutely fascinating story, which incorporates out of body experiences, deep meditative experiences, psychedelic experiences, dream experiences, phenomenal religious, supernatural experiences, being spoken to by Jesus and God, and having the angels come to me, you know, in some sort of, you know, bizarre state of consciousness, like the brightest and crispest of astral projections, all these things. So you've read about those. What do you think about those for the last, we got, say, like 3 minutes, 5 minutes maybe. What do you think about those phenomenological things that I'm proclaiming that I experience? Do you have any allegiance with those, or does it seem just too bizarre?
No, I think it's a part of reality, and we are led to believe that things like that ain't real, but it is very real. Well, while I'm experiencing it myself, I can say it is real, but the people want to throw off all kinds of scientific terms like paralysis and so on, just to take away the realness of it all, and
Yeah.
base it on mere flesh and matter.
And
But there is things that go beyond our bodies and so on, and that's certainly something that we experience being in those realms.
yes, and it's so ridiculous that the so-called scientists and specialists, neuroscientists and all the rest of it, they even self-proclaim that they don't know anything in real terms about the brain and about what it is to be a human being. Scientists don't even know what consciousness is. They don't know the fundamental basis and premise of our existence. And so if you don't even know that, you may as well just not talk at all. And I just hold up my hand and say, talk to the hand, scientist, because the face ain't listening, because this isn't a physical dimension. And even the greatest of quantum physicists on the planet tell us that. And, nobody's, poo-pooing that because they can't, because we do test after test after test, which show that there's no corporeal reality here, period. And yet people carry on, day in and day out, proclaiming that they have some physical evidence and, they've wrote, equations that mean this and mean that. When at the end of the day, there's nothing that is fundamentally true here, except that there's an isness, which we feel. It's like René Descartes. The only thing he couldn't deny was that there was something that he felt and thought. All the rest of it he could discount.
Yeah.
So there's so many things. When the two angels came to me, when Jesus spoke to me, when God chastised me on, 4.5 grams of semilanceta, that's all mind. That's all consciousness. And millions of people have had these experiences. And just because scientists can't quantify them, then they dismiss them. And it really is preposterous. And so,
Yeah.
but
It,
anyway.
it is a way to for themselves also, I think, because if they just take away any knowing, so to speak, they will be lost in the abyss. They will have no ground to stand on. So it's really a fear they are basing it all on, I would think, in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it
You
is the
always
egoic
talk about the
fear.
material.
They're so far away from God. They've bought so much into this fiction of the ego that they've got no relationship with spirit at all. Spirit terrifies them, and so they just don't want to go there, and they deny it at every cost. So this is probably just going to cut out now. Now, I mean, it allows me to do another one in about 15 minutes. So are you available in 15 minutes time, or shall we do it on another day? Yeah.
We can take it in 15 minutes time.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Right, brilliant. So we'll have a cup of tea then, and then I'll send you the link when it's ready. You see, they do this. They never used to give you 15 minutes. You could start another one straight after, but they realized too many people were just doing that, and so then they do it just to fuck with you and to force you into buying it. And then they say it's only €7.99 a month, and then when you get the bill, it's 15, and there's all trickery and deception, and it's just horrible dealing with these people these days with